Okay, I will upload the notes today. Okay. Actually, my credentials are not working. We'll resolve the issue today and I'll upload. Okay then. Let's move on. Yeah. That's good. Let's move on. Done. Okay. Let's move on. We started our discussion with features of Hibernate. So in these features of Hibernate, we discussed so far the features like this. I just want to write the names and then we'll continue for the today's class. I told about HQL. I told about the caching yesterday. This is yesterday's topic. I told about a concept called as lazy loading. Then I told the concept like connection pooling. Okay, these are the features which we discussed in the last class. HQL, caching, lazy loading, and the connection pooling. Okay. Are you getting my point? Right. So coming to, okay, no problem. Now coming to today's features. Let us understand, guys, we are going to talk about a concept called criteria. I will explain, what is this criteria. I'll talk about what is criteria. Just understand about it. Already we discussed about HQL. We got about caching, lazy loading, connection pooling. And now we are going to understand about criteria. Okay. Basically, assume that, okay, I have a question now. You write your answer in chat box. My question is, in my table, suppose if the table is EMP, and in my table, say for example, I have 4 columns: employee number, employee name, salary, department number. I have a table has 4 columns. And I'm writing a query like this. My query is select star from EMP. Okay. And the other query I'm writing, select EMPNO, comma, ename, comma, sal, comma, DEPTNO from EMP. So I have a table EMP, and my EMP table has 4 columns. One query I'm writing is what select star from EMP. Other query I'm writing is what select EMPNO, comma, ename, comma, sal, DEPTNO from EMP. Both the queries are going to return the same result, right? Because my table has only 4 columns. Here I'm not reducing the number of columns. Okay, 2 queries I've written. Both queries return same data. Both queries returns the same result. I mean, say I'm getting the same data from both the queries. But now the question is, which query will return the data fastly from the database table? Okay, write your answer in chat box. Guess which query returns data fastly. There are 2 queries now. Select star from EMP. Select EMPNO, ename, sal, DEPTNO from EMP. My table has 4 columns only. In the first query, simply I'm writing select star, star indicating all attributes. Attributes meaning columns only, na? Attributes are nothing but columns. Okay, select star from EMP means all attributes I want to select from EMP table. Okay. There are 4 attributes are there, nothing but 4 columns are there. Second query is what? Select EMPNO, ename, sal from, DEPTNO from EMP. Then I have 4 columns only are there, na? So I'm typing 4 attributes names in my select query. Now my question is, if both queries are returning same data, which query will run faster? You are getting my point, right? Yeah. Guess the answer. Okay. Good. Okay then. Now coming to the output now. Second query runs faster than first query. Select star from EMP is slower. Select EMPNO, ename, sal, DEPTNO from EMP. That query will run very faster than select star from EMP. Because when I write select star from EMP, whenever I write a query like that, the database engine has to check what are the columns in the EMP table. It has to find out the order of the columns. First, it should get the metadata of the table EMP. After getting the metadata of the table EMP, then it is going to return the result for me. It will take some time. Okay, that time may be a gap of milliseconds or maybe a second, whatever it is, but select star from EMP is comparatively slow than select EMPNO, ename, sal, DEPTNO from EMP. The second query will run faster when compared with the first query. We can say something like this: a query which returns the data fastly from the database table as a tuned query. What query we call it as? Tuned query, TUNED, tuned query. So which one is a tuned query here? The second one is a tuned query. Not the first one, but the second one is the tuned query. Correct. Coming to Hibernate. Of course, as we all know that Hibernate is also going to work with persistence layer only. Means a Hibernate framework we cannot use for writing business logics. Or a Hibernate framework we cannot use for presentation logics. Hibernate is a framework which can be used only for creating the business persistence layer of an application. Which layer we can create by using it? Yeah, persistence layer of an application can be created using Hibernate. Hibernate is not for any writing MVC applications, or Hibernate is not for implementing any service layer applications. It can be only used for implementing, or it can be only used for developing data access layer of an application, which is also called as what layer? Persistence layer of an application. Which is also called as what? Persistence layer of an application. Coming to the point. Point is, this is a simple query. Okay, one query we discussed like this. But when you are working with the database, to make your application faster, whatever the queries that you are executing on database, most of the queries you have to run as tuned queries on database. If your code is running tuned query on database, then your code will get the data faster from database. So that what your application performance will be improved. Means what type of queries you have to write and execute? Tuned queries you have to write and execute. Correct? Right. What type of queries you have to run and execute? Tuned queries. Tuned queries you have to write and execute. Okay, right? So that what will happen? Your application's performance will be improved. But we are a Java developer. Query tuning is a very big subject for a DBA, database administrators. There are many rules applied in query tuning. Okay, there are many rules applied in query tuning. Point is what now? As a Java developer, We are mostly focusing on creating the business layer and presentation layer. And we are not a dedicated DBS. We are not the dedicated developers for a database. Our application need data. So we are running a query on database and we are fetching the data, whatever we want. Then we are going to start using it in our business, right? But we are not the dedicated developers of a DBA. And as a Java developer, we don't have any query tuning knowledge. Am I right or not? We don't have any query tuning knowledge as a Java developer. We don't have any query tuning knowledge. You are getting my point? Right. So Hibernate came with a solution that is called criteria. What is happening in criteria? Basically, what I can say in criteria is Hibernate only. Just you tell the Hibernate in Java format. You tell the Hibernate in Java format means you tell the Hibernate using Java methods, Java classes. What you are telling? I want this data. I want this data. I want these records. In which language you are telling the Hibernate? Java. What Hibernate will do? Hibernate will prepare one tuned query. What type of query? Tuned query. Hibernate will prepare a tuned query and will run this tuned query on database. Okay, got it my point? What Hibernate will do? Yes, it will run a tuned query on database and will fetch the data from database. You got my point now? That's it. It's very simple. So I no need to bother about what? Query tuning. Even though I don't know about query tuning, what Hibernate is providing me? Tuned queries. How I am telling to Hibernate that I want this data, I want this data from the database table. I am calling the Java methods. I am calling the Java methods. I am calling the Java methods and I am telling the Hibernate in the form of Java language. But what Hibernate will do for me? Hibernate will prepare a tuned query, will execute that query on database and will return the data for my application. So which concept is given in Hibernate to perform these things? Criteria. This is one of the another very important feature of Hibernate. Because with the help of criteria, your application performance will be improved. Why only Hibernate used rather than so many ORM tools available in this market? In the market, there are so many tools are available. Correct? You are getting my point? Right. Then Hibernate only uses most popularly in the applications. Why Hibernate only uses most popularly in the applications? Because of its features. Mainly because of it will provide good performance. Because if you talk about HQL, if you talk about caching yesterday, lazy loading, connection pooling, today we are discussing about what? Criteria. What all these things will do? Will improve the performance of an application. HQL is the only one where we are not discussing about the performance, but remaining all are to improve the performance only now. HQL is for what? To make your queries are database independent. So means what? Hibernate is making your queries as database independent. Hibernate is going to run your queries fastly on the database and fetching the data. And Hibernate automatically performs query tuning, will take care of connection pooling. And next we are going to look at about locking, right? So basically, because of all these features, 99% if you take any Java project in the real time today, 99% of the real-time projects, whatever you do today, you just observe it. 99% that every Java project uses what? Hibernate only. 1% different. 1% some projects are there even till today we chooses old JDBC. Because the client don't want. The client has to put money for upgradation, right? If the client not interested, okay. Client satisfied with only servlet, JSP, JDBC. Still there are some projects like that. There are some projects are there which are on studs today. Okay, right. There are some projects with even the Spring Boot, microservices, cloud, all these things came, but still we can find out what there are some projects in studs also. If you take a government project, most of the projects are studs only because they don't want to again invest money on software. Okay, right. Obviously. So what is the point I'm trying to say? Hibernate is the most popular reason because it is going to take care of every area which is required in application for improving the performance. Lazy loading. What I told yesterday, lazy loading. What is lazy loading? You know, type in chat box. Yeah. What do you mean by lazy loading? What do you mean by lazy loading? Hibernate doesn't go to the database unnecessarily. Hibernate doesn't go to the database unnecessarily. What Hibernate will do? First, it will create a proxy object and will return the proxy object only. Whenever application is trying to access the real object, then it will go to the database. This is called what loading? Lazy loading. There also it is reducing the number of trips between application database. Caching also reducing the trips between application and database. So these are all used to improve the performance of what? Application. Right. Good. So we got the concept called what? Criteria. Okay. How to work with the criteria? Second story. How to work with HQL, connection, pooling, lazy loading. These are all just features we are discussing now. Today, we are not writing any program to show you that this is the tuned query. We can see that query. I'll show you the query when we are executing our code. Okay, that query understanding also be difficult for us. Okay, right? We can see that query, but of course, we can see on the console whether that query is what. What is the query that Hibernate has created for us and execute on the database. We can see those queries. Okay, right? But the feature is called criteria. So let's move on. I will write 2-3 points regarding this. Then I will continue the next one. How to work with the criteria? Wait for another 1.5 week. Then you'll come to know what is criteria. So what I want to write here, the point regarding this. Right. So to get the same data, to get the same data from database, we can write different queries. Okay. What? To get the data from database, same data from database, we can have different queries. But a query which returns the data fastly. I can say what? A query which returns the data fastly. Okay. Which returns the data fastly is important. Is important. In Hibernate. What? In Hibernate, criteria API is provided. In Hibernate, criteria API is provided to create tuned queries. TUNED. In Hibernate, criteria API is provided to create tuned queries. To create tuned queries. So, an application will fetch the data fastly from DB and hence the performance is improved. And hence the performance is improved. and hence the performance is improved. Okay, so this is the feature I just want to tell you. Next feature. Okay, the next feature I'm going to talk. Okay, so now let's move on about the next feature. Coming to the next feature, the other feature what I'm talking is the feature what I can say, that is locking. Okay, so there is a feature called locking. Let's understand about what locking is. Let us try to understand about what is locking. Okay, right, let's move on. Look at this now. Point is, when we are working with multi-threading applications, I repeat once again, when we are working with the multi-threading applications I'm talking about. So when we are working with the multi-threading applications, what happens? Two threads. Okay, two threads meaning feel that two transactions. Again, here we need to understand about transaction. Okay. Okay, I'll explain about transaction concept later. It's not the right time to discuss about transaction. But just understand that there are two threads are executing transactions on the same data concurrently. Okay. Concurrently meaning we have two words called what? Sequentially and concurrently. Sequentially meaning one after the other. That's called sequential, right? But concurrently means at the same time. At the same time, at a particular moment or at the same moment, multiple transactions are working on the same data. Multiple transactions are working on the same data. Same data. Okay. Then what happens? If one transaction updates the data, if one transaction updates the data in the database, other transaction can override that data. Other transaction can override that data. Override the data. Getting my point, right? When two transactions are parallelly working on the I mean concurrently working on the same data, then what? One transaction made changes can be overridden by another transaction. This is possible. This is possible. This is possible actually. It's possible. Okay. But how to prevent it? Means what? When two or more transactions are working on the same data, then what? One transaction one transaction made changes should not be overridden by another transaction. When two transactions are concurrently working on the same data, then one transaction made changes should not be overridden by another transaction. Which means we want to allow how many transactions to make changes to the data at a time? Only one. If one transaction is already making changes, other transaction has to wait. Other transaction has to wait. Are you getting my point? Other transaction has to wait. After the first transaction is completed, then second transaction can continue. Because the transaction is completed now. Now how many transactions are concurrently working? One only. Now it can do changes. Now it can do changes. But when two transactions are parallelly working, then how many transactions should be allowed? Only one. Okay, two transactions are working. Transaction one is working on employees with a salary less than 10,000. Second transaction is working on employees with a salary more than 10,000. Both transactions are working concurrently, but not working on same data. Then there is no need of locking now, because one transaction is working on less than 10,000 salary. Another transaction is working on more than 10,000 salary. Both are not working on same data. So obviously what both transactions can continue to work. No need of any locking. But when locking is required, when two or more transactions are working on the same data, I am not talking about same table. Multiple transactions can work on same table. If they are working on same table, doesn't mean that working on same data, na? Right? So if they are working on same data, then we need a mechanism called locking. For what? To prevent one transaction is overriding the changes made by the other transaction. For that, what is required? Locking is required. Again, in locking, there are two types of locks are available. One is called optimistic lock. Second one is called pessimistic lock. Optimistic locking and pessimistic locking are the how many types of locking we have? Two types of locking is there. This locking even we can use in JDBC also, and even in Hibernate also. In Hibernate, it's built-in concept. In other, if you're not working with Hibernate, you have to do it manually. You have to do it manually. With your manual code, you have to do it. There are two types of locking is there. What are the two types? Optimistic locking and pessimistic locking. So in a Hibernate, we have a built-in mechanism for optimistic locking and pessimistic locking. So we no need of writing any code manually. If you are not working with Hibernate, you have to write the code manually. You have to write the code manually. But if you are working with Hibernate, it has a built-in mechanism. Just we are going to use it in our application, that's all. But we no need of writing any more code for it. That is called locking feature. So what is the locking feature of Hibernate? It does not allow, or it doesn't allow multiple transactions. It doesn't allow multiple transactions to modify the same data at the same time concurrently. How many transactions it will allow? Only one. If one transaction is already working on the same data, other transaction is not allowed to modify that data. Other transaction is allowed to read the data. Reading is not modifying now. Suppose your transaction is updating the employees. My transaction is selecting the employees. My transaction is updating the employee or selecting the employee. Selecting the employee, select is not a transaction operation. Select is not a, remember, what are the transaction operations? Insert, update, and delete. These three are called transaction operations. Select is not a transaction. Select operation is not belongs to the transaction operation. You got my point clearly? Right. So what is the advantage of locking mechanism in Hibernate now? Yeah, write in chat box. Good. Waiting for your response. Make it fast. Okay, good. Whatever you written, but okay, whatever you understood, that you write in your own words. Okay, write in the chat box fastly. Okay, take the point here. I'm writing the point like this now. By default, multiple transactions can work on the by default multiple transactions can work on the same data concurrently. Here I'm writing some points for you. By default, multiple transactions can work on the same data concurrently. What's the point I'm writing? When multiple transactions are working, I'm writing TXS means transactions. When multiple transactions are working on same data concurrently, when multiple transactions are working on some data concurrently, one transaction made changes. One transaction made changes can be overridden by one transaction made changes can be overridden by the another transaction. One transaction made changes can be overridden by the another transaction. When multiple transactions are working on the same data concurrently, one transaction made changes can be overridden by the another transaction. So to prevent it, Hibernate has provided locking. You will understand all these things in coding. Currently, just only we are discussing, that's all. To prevent it, Hibernate has provided locking. Locking. Two types of locking can be used. When multiple transactions are working on same data or working on the same data. When multiple transactions are working on the same data. Two types of locking can be used when multiple transactions are working on the same data. One is optimistic locking. Second one is pessimistic locking. What is optimistic and what is pessimistic? Currently, we are not discussing. Only know the words. Today, you learned only the words. In next upcoming classes, you will come to know what it is. Okay. Right. This is the feature which we have discussed. Now coming to the other feature. Okay, there is other feature. I'm only talking about what are the very important features of Hibernate. And now we are going to conclude the features by writing the seventh one. And that is called associations. The next one is called associations. Here, what I can say that the explanation is very simple here. Okay, explanation is very simple here because associations, I mean, we can call it as relationships. So when you are working with Hibernate, okay, when you are working with Hibernate, you can find associations called one-to-many. It supports one-to-many, many-to-one, many-to-many, and one-to-one. What are these one-to-many, many-to-one, many-to-many, and one-to-one? These are all called as what? Associations. Associations. These are all called as what? Associations. Nothing but what we can call them as relationships. Okay, right? One customer is associated with multiple orders. One customer is associated with multiple orders. One customer associated multiple orders. Nothing but there is a kind of what association? One to many. One person has one passport. One to one is an association mapping. We can define between them, right? Define between them, right? And we can say, for example, even one customer has one locker. That is also called as what type of association? One to many, one to one. Okay, one customer has multiple addresses. One to many, or we can even define it as many to one. Even we can also define it as a many to one, many to one. Okay, right? Right. I can say multiple products belongs to one category. Multiple products belongs to one category. Association is called many to one, many to one. Like that, what are all these? One to many to one, many to many, and one to one associations. Hibernate supports all these associations, which means what? We can write our applications by providing one to many association, many to one association. You are learning Hibernate because of to learn this concept only. Hibernate main concept is what? Associations only. Remaining all built-in features. But what you have to explicitly define in the code, that is associations. You have to provide one to many to one association between Java objects. Okay, right? And that is what actually you need to learn and use. So that's the reason why you're learning Hibernate. Actually, the main heart concept of Hibernate is associations only. You have to learn these relationships only. These relationships only important. But directly we can't discuss relationships. We need to discuss some basic concepts first. Okay, right. So the point what I want to write is Hibernate supports relationships. Associations are relationships. Okay, we call it as one to many. Then we call it as many to one. Then we call it as many to many. Then we call it as one to one. Then we call it as one to one. Okay, one to many to one, many to many, and one to one. These are all called as what? Finally, these are all called as associations. Yes, these are all called associations. Okay, right. Good. All these are supported in Hibernate. We'll see how they are going to be next. Now coming to, now these are all the features what we discussed, but now we want to understand today. So now we'll understand about, if I want to write a Hibernate application, first of all, there are 4 files required. So we are discussing about what are the 4 files required to write Hibernate application. Right, okay. Anyhow, we are going to use Maven as a build tool. Whenever you are working with frameworks, you have to use build tool. Which build tool we are going to use to write or work with Hibernate? Maven. Even for Spring also we use Spring Boot, microservices. Everywhere we are going to use build tool as Maven. Sometimes we may use Gradle also. It depends. But most popular tool is Maven. Maven is a build tool. Okay, right? So that Maven basics at least you should know. So those basics I will just explain how the Maven project structure. How do you create a Maven project? And what is a dependency tag in the pom.xml file. Up to this, I'll explain. It's not complete Maven class. Again, I'm telling you. I don't want to explain the complete Maven in this Hibernate class. Because again, it will take more time for me to explain complete Maven. More time it will take for me to explain the completely Maven. If I want to take complete Maven, it may take around 2 weeks, 3 weeks also, or maybe a month required for me. But basic just only to write Hibernate application, to start kickstart applications, and then to write applications. What we need? We need basics of Hibernate so that you can at least come to know and you can write the applications next. That is the reason why. That is the reason why some basics I'll explain. That before we start with the example. Today, what I'm talking is, as I said already, the very first example, whatever we are creating in our class is purely Hibernate without using any JPA. Without using any JPA, nothing but Java Persistence API. As I said already, Hibernate first, JPA first. Who came first actually into the market? Hibernate only. Hibernate only came first into the market. After that, then what came? JPA. Are you getting my point or not? Are you getting the point concept clearly? Right, very good. I told already in the very first session only, what I told, working with Hibernate and working with JPA, how can you differentiate? The first example is purely Hibernate. I will introduce about how to write the mapping file in XML, Hibernate configuration file. The first example is purely Hibernate. We are going to look at with only purely Hibernate without using any JPA. Without using any JPA. Then second example onwards, every example will be JPA with Hibernate as a JPA provider. With Hibernate as a JPA provider. That's all. That's what our class now, Hibernate with JPA. So today you have to learn Hibernate with JPA, not pure Hibernate. Not pure Hibernate. What is required for you? Hibernate with JPA. But just to introduce very first example, the very first application that what we are creating in our class, that first example is purely Hibernate application. Okay, right. To create Hibernate application, there are 4 files required, minimum. Okay, how many files required? 4 files required, minimum. First one is you need one Java class first. We call that Java class as a Pojo class. What we call it as? Pojo class. Pojo class, or even we can call it as a Java Bean class. Second one, what we need is a Hibernate mapping file. Third one, what we need, a Hibernate configuration file. And fourth one, you write one test program, one client program required to test for inserting the object, deleting the object, because I told ORM tools can perform the operations in the form of objects. Why we are using ORM tools? Why we are using Hibernate or something else? To transfer the objects between our application and database. With JDBC, what we can do? We can transfer the raw data, means values we can transfer, but we cannot transfer the objects. But with Hibernate, what you can do? You can transfer the object. I can transfer employee to database, or I can fetch the employee from database. I can transfer customer to database. I can fetch the customer from database. That's the reason why we are using what? ORM tools. That's the reason why we are using the ORM tools. Nothing but Hibernate. Okay. See, what is a session now? What we want to discuss is, we want to write here. What we want to write is files required for the first application. Okay. There are 4 files required. How many? 4. There are 4 files required to write the first application Hibernate. One is Pojo class. Pojo class. Pojo stands for POJO. Write in the chat box. Write in the chat box. POJO stands for dash. Please write in chat box. Please write in the chat box. POJO stands for dash. Please write in chat box, guys. POJO stands for dash. Good guys. Pojo class means plain old Java object. Pojo class is the first point to know. Second one, mapping file. Third one, configuration file. Fourth one, client program. Okay. One is Pojo class. Second one, mapping file. Third one, configuration file. Fourth one, client program. Pojo class, mapping file, configuration file, and the next one is the client program. Like this, totally how many files required? 4 files required. To write the Hibernate application, you need 4 files now. In that, the first one is what? Pojo class. Okay, let us understand what is Pojo class now. Pojo class means Pojo class only. Pojo class means what is Pojo class here? Pojo class means, see, when you are working with Java, I'll explain you. Some classes we are calling as exception classes. 99.99% people in Java doesn't know what is Pojo directly. I repeat once again. I have a lot of clarity on subject. Nobody has clarity than me, I feel. Nakanta clarity on the subject meeda. Because I tried like that. I learned like that. Okay. 99%. You take any years of employee guy, working in real time or not working in real time, learn, not learn, anybody. 99.99% people knows Pojo as a wrong way. Pojo is a very basic word. Okay. I have very good clarity on the subject, no doubt in that. Pojo, for example, you look at Java programming. You are writing some classes and you are extending runtime exception. You know about exception handling. What are you writing? Extends runtime exception. If a class extends runtime exception, what are you calling it? Write in the chat box. Suppose if a class extends runtime exception, what are you calling? You are calling it as what? Unchecked exception. What is it? If a class extends exception class, what are you calling? Checked exception. If a class extends a thread class, you are calling? If a class extends exception, you are calling it as exception class. Checked, unchecked, secondary thing. You are calling it as what class? Exception class. You are not calling it as a Pojo class. Are you calling it as a Pojo class? No. What are you calling it? Exception class you are calling. If a class extends thread, class, then it is called, we are calling thread class. Or when a class implements runnable interface also, then we are calling it as thread class only. If you take array list, linked list, hash set, linked hash set, tree set, what are you calling all these things? What are you calling all these things? Collection classes. What classes? Collection classes. Collection classes you are calling now? Very good. Means what you know already. For example, if a class extends HTTP servlet, what are you calling? If a class extends HTTP servlet, then what is called? Servlet class. Or when you write a class extends generic servlet, it is also called servlet class. Means you know about servlet class, you know about exception class, you know about thread class, you know about collection class. Now my question, if I write class sample, open close, tell me this class is what class now? Yeah. Now I'm writing one class like sample. I'm asking now, tell me what is this? Huh? What is this called? It's a normal Java class. It is normal Java class. It is not exception class now. It's not a thread class. It is not a servlet class also, or even it is not a collection class also. Getting my point? Right. Now what is this? This is called normal Java class. This normal Java class only, we call it as a POJO class. A POJO class is nothing but ordinary Java class. What is it? An ordinary Java class without any special requirements. An ordinary Java class without any special requirements is called as a POJO class. Is called as a POJO class. You are getting my point? Right. I'll give multiple examples to understand it. Okay? Right. Good. Then I'll tell you POJO class and Java Bean. How do you differentiate both of them? Observe here. Good. Good, guys. Observe here. I'll explain you once again. For example, I'm writing a class like this. For an example, I'm writing a class like this. I'll give you an idea of what it is. Okay? I'll give you that. Please understand me. Public class login action extends action. And there is some method I'm overriding. Leave it. Execute method I'm overriding. Something like that. Public action forward execute blah 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 something. I'm writing some code like this. Just understand what I'm writing, that's all. Logic is here. Close it, then close it. There is a class called what? Login action. What I'm writing here extends action. Here I'm writing one class, and my class is, okay, what my class is doing now? My class is extending this action. My class extending this action class here. It is extending this action class. Actually, this is from Struts framework. This class is from Struts framework. Assume that Struts framework. Now tell me, can I call my login action class as a POJO class or not? Can I call my login action class as a POJO class now? No. Why? Why I cannot call my login action class as a POJO class? Because it is binded with this class given by the framework. Given by the framework. Okay, right? It is given by the framework. It is binding with this. And that's the reason why I cannot call this class as a POJO class. So this is not a POJO class. Right? Now it is a normal Java class or it is not a normal Java class? It's not a normal Java class. It is not a normal Java class. So we are calling it as not a POJO class. So when we can call that a class is POJO class? If a class is not binded with any framework or is not binded with any technology. If a class is not binded with any framework or not binded with any technology. Okay, in simple terms, I can say what? If a class is not extending, any classes from any API. If a class is not extending any classes from any API or any interfaces from any API except serializable interface, then we can call that class as a POJO class in Java. You are getting my point? Once again, I repeat. If a class is not extending any class or not implementing any interface from any API. Any API means what? Your Hibernate API, Struts API, Spring API, Java API. These are all APIs only, na? Right? Your class is not extending any class or not implementing any interface from any API except serializable interface. Except one interface. What is it? Serializable interface. Then that Java class is called as POJO class. For example, I'm writing like this now. I'll give multiple examples to understand now because it takes some time for you to understand. If you want to understand immediately, we'll discuss one by one examples to get it. For example, I'm writing something like this. For example, I'm writing class student. Class student. Okay, inside the class there are variables, methods. That story is different. Okay, inside the class variables are there, methods are there, constructors are there. Our constructor parameters constructor is there, default constructor is there. I'm not talking about inside what is there. We don't talk about the inside logic. We only talk about the class header. We talk about the only class header, class student. But I'm not writing student extends something. If I'm writing, for example, class student extends HTTP servlet, then it is not called POJO class, no? It is called what? Servlet class. You have a word for that, servlet class. A special word is given. It is a servlet class, not a POJO class, right? If you read, for example, extends exception, it is not called POJO class. It is called exception class. If you read extends thread, it is called thread class. You have different words for that. Exception class, thread class. It is a collection class. It is servlet class, like that. Okay. If, for example, if it extends action, it is called action class in Struts. If it extends action form, it is called form bean class. Struts framework. Okay, form bean class. They are getting my point? Right, good. But if I don't write any extents like this, then it is POJO class. So what is the POJO class definition? What is the POJO class definition? It is an ordinary Java class which is not extending any class or which is not implementing any interface from any API, except serializable interface of Java. You know serializable interface purpose, right? Right. Serializable interface can be used for making the objects as what objects? serialized objects. If you make an object a serialized object, then only you can transfer that object in the network. Am I right or not? Suppose my program I'm running in the system, my database is in somewhere in the network. I want to save the object there. Then tell me this object must be transferred over the network now. To transfer the object in network, it must be what type of object? Serialized object. That's the reason why what I'm saying, except serializable, except a serializable interface. That class is called what? POJO class. You got the point now? Right. First note on the definition. I'll read the definition here, guys. Understand it. I would like to say what is POJO class first. POJO class. I can say first POJO stands for plain old Java object. POJO stands for what, guys? Plain old Java object. A Java class which does not extend, or which does not implement. Okay, which does not implement. I'll give multiple examples to understand it. Okay, a Java class which does not extend or which does not implement any class or interface from any API. Okay, a Java class which does not extend or which does not implement any class or interface from any API. Then except serializable, except java.io.serializable, except java.io.serializable, right? Then tell me it is called as what? POJO class. Any class or interface from any API except java.io.serializable is called as a POJO class. Except java.io.serializable is called as a POJO class. Okay, right. Let us write. I'm writing an example 1. Okay, example 1. I'm writing something like a class. Let us take simple name like A. First, I want to tell you class A, simple class A. Okay, inside the class A, there are variables, methods. That's okay. Inside the class, variables are there, methods are there, only methods are there, or only variables are there. That is not a matter. This is class A. Now we can call this class as what? Yes, we can call it as a POJO class. We know that this is a POJO class. So we can call it as a POJO class, definitely. It's a POJO class. Now the next question, I'm writing like this now. What I'm writing is class B extends A. It has variables and methods again. Now the question is, can I call class B as a POJO class or not? Type in the chat box. Can we call the class B as a POJO class or not? What is your answer then? Okay, answer, it is a POJO class. Answer, we call it as a POJO class only. Okay. Understand clearly. If a base class is a POJO class, I repeat again. If a base class is a POJO class, then derived class is also a POJO class. What is class B extends A? B is what? B is a subclass of A, nothing but derived class of A. A is already what? POJO class. If base class is a POJO class, then we can call derived class also as a POJO class. Moreover, class A is from any API. I'm writing class A right first. Is it from any API? Is it given by your Java API from java.lang package or java.util package? Or is it from servlet API? No, no. Class A is written by me only, no? It is a class from API or it is a user-defined class? It's a user-defined class, not from any API, right? Now, what about class B then? B is also called as a POJO class. So when we can say that derived class is a POJO class or not? If the base class is a POJO class, then derived class is also a POJO class. If a base class is already a POJO class, then derived class is also a POJO class. You understood my point clearly? You got my point? Nice, very good. Good. Next. Okay. We are done now. That's enough to understand, nothing more. What's the second one? Mapping file. So before I go to mapping file, I want to give you what is Java Bean. I want to talk about next one is what is Java Bean. You just first keep the point in mind. Every Java Bean is a POJO class. But every POJO class is not a Java Bean class. Every Java Bean is a POJO class, but every POJO class is not a Java Bean class. A Java Bean is a POJO class with additional policies. In Java, some policies are defined to say that it is a Java Bean class. Policy number one, class must be public. Policy number two, the private variables must contain setter getter methods. Policy number three, class must contain default constructor. Policy number four, class can implement, not must, can implement serializable interface. Four policies are given. I repeat the four policies once again. Policy number one, class must be public. Second policy, private variables must contain setter and getter methods. Third policy, class must contain default constructor. Class must contain default constructor. Policy number four, it can implement, not must implement, can implement java.io.serializable. Then we can call it as a Java Bean class. If these policies are followed, again our class is POJO class only. Are you getting my point or not? That's the reason why every Java Bean class is what? POJO class. But every POJO class is not Java Bean. For POJO class, you don't have these many rules, na? What's the only one rule you know? It should not extend, it should not implement any interface or any class from any API except serializable interface. That is called what class? POJO class. But in POJO class, you don't have any rules like POJO class must contain default constructor. POJO class must be public, must contain setter, getter methods. These things are not there in POJO class. But these are the policies for Java Bean. We call these are the rules. Sun Microsystems define, framed some rules and given us this type of classes are called Java Beans. That's all. What are the rules then? What are the rules now? Chart, write in the chat box now. Write in the chat box. Tell me. take a minute time and type the rules what you know about Java Bean class. Okay, nice guys, nice. Thank you. Observe here, I'm writing here. Better you write, keep heading Java Bean. Okay, a Java class which follows below, I'm writing here, which follows the below rules or policies. A Java class which follows the below rules, or we can call it as what guys, policies. Okay, a Java class which follows the below rules or policies can be called as a Java Bean class. First one, class must be public. I'm writing here, class must be public, and class must contain default constructor, otherwise parameterless constructor, better word. And the third rule I want to say, okay, private members I mean variables, private members should contain setter getter methods. Should contain setter getter methods. Fourth rule is optional. Class can implement serializable interface. Class can implement serializable interface. Okay. First one is what, class must be public. Second one, class must contain default constructor. Third one is what, private members should contain setter getter methods. Fourth one is what, class can implement serializable interface. Then we can call that class as what, Java Bean. That is called as Java Bean class. Okay, right, that is called as Java Bean class. Class can implement serializable interface. So another point I want to write, hint I am writing, every Java Bean class is a POJO class. Every Java Bean class is a POJO class. But every POJO class is not a Java Bean class. This is what you need to understand. Every Java Bean class is a POJO class, but every POJO class is not a Java Bean class. is not a Java Bean class. Okay, guys. DFD, done for the day. Yeah, guys. Okay. I will try to what I can say is I'll upload the class notes today